Welcome back to Her Real Stories, where we share authentic tales of women who refuse to be taken for granted. I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about unconditional love and family loyalty. This is my story, the story of and Emmanuel, a 58-year-old businesswoman who learned that sometimes the people you'd do anything for wouldn't do the simplest thing for you. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because the women who find us always seem to need these stories at exactly the right moment. And if you've been with us for a while, you know we don't just tell stories, we share lessons that can change your life. So settle in, because this one's going to take you on a journey from heartbreak to empowerment that you'll never forget. My name is Emmanuel, and I'm about to tell you about the 13-hour drive that changed my life forever. Picture this. It's a crisp October morning in 2023, and I'm standing in my marble-floored foyer in Charleston, South Carolina, adjusting my pearl necklace one last time before what I thought would be one of the most important drives of my life. At 58, I've been blessed with the kind of beauty that ages like fine wine, silver hair that catches light like spun platinum, eyes the color of warm honey, and the kind of elegant bone structure that makes people assume I come from old money. I don't. Every dollar I have, I earned through sweat, tears, and more business deals than I care to count. But that morning, none of that mattered. What mattered was getting to my daughter. My phone had buzzed 3 days earlier with a text that made my heart skip. Mom, Charles proposed. Engagement dinner Friday at 7 p.m. Can't wait for you to meet his family properly. Love you. 13 hours. That's how long it takes to drive from Charleston to Boston in good traffic. I could have flown, but I wanted the time to think, to prepare myself for meeting the Davenport family, old Boston money, the kind of people who probably had portraits of their ancestors hanging in every room. My daughter Tiffany, 27 years old and stunning in that effortless way that comes from never having wanted for anything, had been dating Charles Davenport III for 8 months. Every phone call had been filled with stories about his family's estate, their yacht, their connections. I'd learned to listen with the right amount of enthusiasm while privately wondering if she was falling in love with the man or the lifestyle. But she was my only child, my everything, and if she was happy, I was happy. The drive up I-95 gave me plenty of time to remember. Tiffany's first day of kindergarten, when she'd clung to my legs and begged me not to leave. Her high school graduation, when she'd thanked me in her valedictorian speech for always believing in me. Her college acceptance to Harvard, the way she'd screamed with joy when the letter came. Somewhere along the way, those memories had been replaced by shorter phone calls, missed holidays, and conversations that seemed to revolve entirely around what she needed rather than how she was doing. But I'd told myself that was normal. She was building her life, finding her independence. I was proud of her. I should have been proud of myself too. I'd built Emmanuel Consulting from nothing, a single-woman business advising Fortune 500 companies on market strategy. By the time Tiffany graduated college, I was worth $12 million and climbing. Not bad for a girl from rural South Carolina whose father had told her she'd never amount to anything. But that Friday evening, as I pulled up to the Davenport family mansion in Beacon Hill, I wasn't thinking about my success. I was thinking about how much I'd miss my daughter and how excited I was to finally meet the man who'd captured her heart. The house was everything I'd expected: red brick, black shutters, the kind of understated elegance that screams wealth without trying. I checked my reflection one more time in the rearview mirror, smoothed my black cashmere dress, and walked up to the front door with a bottle of champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The woman who answered was clearly Eleanor Davenport, Charles's mother. She was my age, but carried herself like European royalty, all sharp cheekbones and sharper judgment. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe in the space of 3 seconds, cataloging my designer dress, my jewelry, my carefully styled hair. "You must be Tiffany's mother," she said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to be polite and just enough coolness to let me know where I stood. "And Emmanuel," I said, extending my hand and my most charming smile. "Thank you so much for including me tonight. I'm thrilled to finally meet Charles's family." Something flickered across her face, confusion, then what might have been embarrassment. "Oh dear," she said, and my stomach began to sink. "I'm afraid there's been some miscommunication. The engagement dinner was last night." The words hit me like ice water. Last night. Yes, we had a lovely intimate gathering. Just close family, you understand. Immediate family only. The way she said immediate made it clear that I didn't qualify. I stood there on that pristine doorstep, 13 hours of driving behind me, clutching a bottle of champagne for a party that had happened without me. In that moment, I felt every one of my 58 years, every mile I'd driven, every hope I'd carried for this evening. "Mom." Tiffany's voice came from somewhere behind Eleanor, bright and cheerful as always. She appeared in the doorway, wearing a stunning emerald dress that I'd paid for, her engagement ring catching the light from the foyer chandelier. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I thought the dinner was tonight?" "Oh," she laughed, that careless laugh of someone who'd never had to worry about disappointing others. "Didn't I text you? We moved it to last night. Charles's grandmother could only make it then, and you know how important family is." Family. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? "Well, congratulations, darling. I'm so happy for you both." I hugged her, breathed in her familiar perfume, the expensive kind I'd been buying her since college, and handed over the champagne. "For your celebration." "You're so sweet, Mom. I'm sorry about the mix-up. You know how crazy things get with wedding planning." Wedding planning. Right. The wedding I'd undoubtedly be expected to pay for, just like I'd paid for everything else in her life. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll talk soon." I walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster, feeling Eleanor Davenport's eyes on my back the entire time. I didn't look back as I pulled away from the curb, but I did catch a glimpse of Tiffany in the doorway, already turning back into the house where her real family was waiting. The drive to my hotel was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I'd booked a suite at the Four Seasons, planning to stay the weekend and maybe take Tiffany shopping for wedding dresses. Instead, I found myself sitting alone in a room that costs more per night than most people make in a week, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked good for 58. Hell, I looked good for any age. But in that moment, I felt ancient. Used up. Forgotten. That's when something shifted inside me. Something cold and calculating that I'd thought I'd left behind in my business dealings. I'd spent 27 years putting my daughter first, sacrificing my own needs, my own relationships, my own happiness to make sure she had everything she wanted. And she'd repaid me by excluding me from one of the most important moments of her life because I wasn't the right kind of family. I picked up my phone and called my godson Sam, the closest thing to a son I'd ever had. He was 35 now, a successful tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and one of the few people in the world who truly understood me. "Anne? Everything okay? It's late there." "Sam," I said, my voice steady now with purpose. "I need you to help me with something. Something important. Anything. You know that. I need you to help me teach someone a very expensive lesson about family." I didn't say a word to Tiffany that night. But as I sat in that hotel room, looking out at the Boston skyline, I knew exactly when the bill for all of this was going to come due. If you're feeling Anne's pain right now, if you've ever been excluded or taken for granted by the people you love most, I want you to know you're not alone. Before we continue with Anne's story, I have something special for you. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Now, let's see how a story of revenge begins to unfold. The flight back to Charleston gave me 5 hours to think, and by the time I landed, I had perfect clarity about exactly how I'd gotten to this point. Sitting in first class, sipping champagne and watching clouds drift by, I let myself remember everything I'd been trying so hard to forget. It started the day Tiffany was born. Her father, my ex-husband Richard, had looked at our perfect baby girl and said, "She's going to be expensive." He'd meant it as a joke, but even then, I'd known he was right in ways he couldn't imagine. Richard left when Tiffany was 3, couldn't handle the pressure of being a father, he said. Really, he couldn't handle being married to a woman who was more successful than he was. I'd just landed my first major consulting contract, and suddenly, I was the breadwinner. His ego couldn't take it. So it became just me and Tiffany against the world. And I decided she would never want for anything, never feel the instability I'd felt growing up poor in rural South Carolina. If she wanted ballet lessons, she got the best instructor in Charleston. When she wanted to try horseback riding, I bought her a horse. When she got interested in art, I enrolled her in private lessons with a painter who'd shown in galleries in New York. By the time she was in high school, Tiffany's life looked like something out of a magazine. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, a sweet 16 party that cost more than most people's weddings. I told myself I was giving her confidence, showing her what was possible if you worked hard enough. What I was really doing was creating a monster. College was Harvard, of course. $60,000 a year, plus living expenses, plus the car I bought her, plus the credit card for emergencies that seemed to be used for everything but emergencies. I watched my bank account drain and told myself it was an investment in her future. Then came the New York years. Tiffany graduated with a degree in art history and a vague plan to work in the art world. What that meant, apparently, was taking unpaid internships at galleries while I continued to fund her lifestyle. The apartment in Tribeca, the designer wardrobe she needed to look professional, the networking events and charity galas where she could make connections. For 5 years, I wrote checks while she found herself. And gradually, our conversations became transactions. She'd call, we'd chat for a few minutes about her life, and then came the real reason for the call. Rent was due, or she needed money for a work trip, or her laptop had broken, or she'd seen the perfect dress for some important event. I'd become an ATM with feelings. The Charles situation had started 8 months ago. She'd met him at some charity auction, the kind of event where young socialites go to see and be seen. Charles Davenport III, heir to a shipping fortune, Harvard MBA, and, according to Tiffany, absolutely perfect. Our phone calls had become even more superficial after that. She was too busy with Charles to talk long, always rushing off to some dinner or event. But she'd made time to tell me about the Davenport family's expectations, their standards, their social circle. His mother is very particular about appearances, she'd explained during one brief call. The family has certain traditions, certain ways of doing things. It's important that everything be perfect. I nodded along, even felt a little proud that my daughter was being accepted into such an exclusive world. I'd conveniently ignored the part where she seemed to be ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of me. The engagement had been a surprise, at least to me. A 3-carat diamond from Tiffany & Company, a proposal on Martha's Vineyard during a weekend with his family. She'd called me afterward, breathless with excitement, and for a moment it had felt like old times. "Mom, you're going to love him. And his family is wonderful. They have this incredible house in Boston, and they summer in the Hamptons, and Eleanor, that's his mother, she's already talking about introducing me to all their friends." Eleanor, not Mrs. Davenport, not Charles's mother. Eleanor. Like they were already best friends. I can't wait to meet them. I'd said, and I'd meant it. Now, sitting in my Charleston living room with a glass of wine and my laptop open, I was finally seeing the situation clearly. Tiffany hadn't wanted me at that engagement dinner. She'd been hoping I wouldn't show up, that I'd take the hint and stay away. But I'd been too dense, too hopeful, too desperate to be included in my own daughter's life to see what was right in front of me. I was an embarrassment. New money, no pedigree, a working woman who'd built her fortune in business rather than inheriting it. Eleanor Davenport had taken one look at me and known exactly what I was, someone who didn't belong. And Tiffany agreed with her. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Tiffany's name appeared on the screen, and for just a moment, my heart leaped. Maybe she was calling to apologize, to explain, to make things right. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice warm and normal.
Mom.
"I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, I have the most exciting news about the wedding." Not an apology, then. Not even an acknowledgement of what had happened. Charles and I have been talking to a wedding planner, and we found the most incredible venue. It's this historic estate in the Berkshires, absolutely gorgeous. But here's the thing, they only have one date available next spring, and we have to put down a deposit this week to hold it. My stomach sank. Here it comes. The thing is, it's pretty expensive. Like, really expensive. But Mom, it's going to be perfect. Eleanor says it's exactly the kind of place the Davenport family should celebrate in. How expensive, Tiffany? Well, the venue alone is $60,000. But that's just the beginning. We're thinking maybe 200 guests, and with catering and flowers and music and photography, the planner thinks we're looking at maybe $180 total. $180,000. For one day. Mom, are you there? I'm here. That's quite a lot of money, sweetheart. I know it sounds like a lot, but think about it as an investment. This wedding is going to introduce me to people who could change my whole life. Charles's family knows everyone, senators, CEOs, old money families from all over New England. This isn't just a wedding. It's my entrance into a whole new world. A world that didn't include me, apparently. Let me think about it, I said. Think about it? Her voice rose, that edge creeping in that I knew meant she was about to have a meltdown. Mom, we need to book this venue now.
Today.
If we wait, someone else will take it. Tiffany, $180,000 is a significant amount of money. I need to look at my finances, see what's possible. But Mom, you have money. You're always talking about your business, your investments. Surely you can spare this for your only daughter's wedding. Spare this?
Like it was pocket change.
I'll call you back, I said. When? Soon. I hung up before she could pressure me further and sat staring at my phone. 27 years of saying yes to everything she wanted, and now she couldn't even wait 24 hours for me to consider the biggest check she'd ever asked me to write. But as I sat there, something else occurred to me. Something that made me smile for the first time since I'd driven to Boston. Tiffany had made a crucial mistake. She'd shown me exactly how much she valued money over family, status over loyalty. She'd revealed that in her mind, I was nothing more than a source of funding for the life she wanted to build with people she actually respected. Well, if that's how she wanted to play it, she was about to learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when you take your funding source for granted. I picked up my phone and called Sam again. "How did it go with Tiffany?" he asked without preamble. Exactly as expected. "Sam, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always. Have I spoiled her? Have I created this monster?" A long pause. Then, "And you know I love you like a mother. And I love Tiffany too. But yes, you've given her everything she's ever wanted without ever requiring anything in return. She doesn't value money because she's never had to earn it. She doesn't value relationships because she's never had to work for yours. The truth hit like a physical blow, but I needed to hear it. It's not too late, Sam continued. But if you're going to change the dynamic, you have to be prepared to follow through. No more bailing her out. No more saying yes to everything. And definitely no more funding a lifestyle she doesn't appreciate. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. But I'm going to need your help. What do you have in mind? I told him about the wedding budget, about Tiffany's attitude, about the way she'd excluded me from the engagement dinner. By the time I finished, Sam was quiet for a long moment. You know this is going to get ugly, he said finally. I'm counting on it. And you're sure? Once we start this, there's no going back. I thought about sitting alone in that hotel room in Boston, about the way Eleanor Davenport had looked at me, about the casual cruelty in Tiffany's voice when she dismissed my feelings. I'm sure. Then let's do this.
But, Anne?
We're going to do it right. By the time we're finished, she's going to understand exactly what she's lost. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one being played. I was the one holding all the cards. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've finally admitted a painful truth to yourself. I made my coffee, settled into my home office overlooking Charleston's historic district, and began what I now think of as the most important business project of my life. First, I called my attorney, Patricia Wells. Patricia and I had been friends since law school. She'd gone into family law while I'd built my consulting business. She was one of the few people who knew the full story of my relationship with Tiffany. And, she said when her secretary put me through, please tell me you're calling about something fun. A vacation, maybe? A new business venture? I need to restructure my finances, I said without preamble. Everything that Tiffany has access to needs to be moved into accounts she can't touch. A pause. What happened? I told her about Boston, about the engagement dinner, about the phone call demanding $180,000 for a wedding that would introduce Tiffany to people who apparently mattered more than I did. Jesus and...
I'm sorry.
That's really cruel. It's clarifying, I said. Patricia, I need you to help me set up a family trust. Something that looks legitimate, sounds official, but gives me complete control over the assets. Are you sure about this? Trust law is complicated, and once money goes into a trust... I'm not actually putting the money in a trust, I interrupted. I'm moving it into accounts Tiffany doesn't know about and then telling her it's in a trust. She's never paid attention to the details of my finances anyway. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's actually brilliant. And completely legal, since it's your money. How much are we talking about? Everything she's ever had access to. Credit cards, joint accounts, the investment account I set up for her future. All of it. And that's going to be a shock. Are you prepared for the fallout? I'm counting on it. We spent the next hour on the phone, working out the details. Patricia would draft official-looking documents for something called the Emanuel Family Trust, with language that made it sound like the money was locked up for tax purposes and couldn't be accessed without specific conditions being met. Next, I called Marcus Chun, my financial advisor. Marcus had been managing my investments for 10 years and knew better than anyone how much I'd been spending on Tiffany. And he said when I explained what I wanted to do, I have to ask, are you sure about this? It's going to be very expensive to unwind all these accounts. Marcus, how much have I spent on Tiffany in the last 5 years? I heard him typing, pulling up records. Including tuition, living expenses, credit card payments, and miscellaneous transfers, approximately $430,000. $430,000. In 5 years. For a daughter who couldn't be bothered to make sure I was included in her engagement dinner. Do it, I said. All of it. I want every account she has access to closed by the end of the week. What about her credit cards? Especially her credit cards. The next call was to Sam. I needed his help with the most delicate part of the plan, making sure Tiffany understood exactly what was happening without making it look like I was doing it out of spite. I'm going to tell her the money is tied up in a trust for tax purposes, I explained. Something that sounds official and unavoidable. But I need you to help me make it look legitimate. What kind of trust? One that requires her to meet certain conditions before she can access the funds. Marriage to someone I approve of, demonstrating financial responsibility, showing proper respect for family, that sort of thing. Sam laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. You're going to make her jump through hoops. I'm going to make her prove she deserves what she's been taking for granted. I love it. What do you need from me? Official-looking paperwork. Maybe a fake law firm letterhead, something that explains the trust requirements in legal language she won't understand but won't question. Consider it done. And what's the end game here? Are you planning to actually cut her off permanently, or is this a lesson you want her to learn? That was the question I'd been asking myself all morning. Was I doing this to punish Tiffany, or to save our relationship? I want her to understand what she's lost, I said finally. I want her to realize that the money she's been treating like her birthright is actually a privilege that can be taken away. And I want her to choose. Does she want a relationship with me, or does she just want my wallet? And if she chooses the wallet, then she gets neither. That afternoon, I drove to my bank and began the process of moving money. It was surprisingly satisfying, watching my assets disappear from accounts Tiffany knew about and reappear in ones she didn't. By the time I was finished, she had access to exactly $0 of my money. But I wasn't just moving money. I was buying myself freedom. Freedom from being taken for granted, freedom from being seen as nothing more than a source of funding, freedom from the exhausting cycle of giving and never receiving anything but demands for more. The credit cards took longer. I had to call each company, explain that I was removing an authorized user, deal with questions about whether this was fraud or identity theft. But by Thursday evening, every card in Tiffany's wallet was nothing more than expensive plastic. Friday morning, my phone rang. It was earlier than Tiffany usually called, but I knew exactly why she was calling before I answered. Mom. Her voice was tight with panic. Something's wrong with my credit card. It got declined at Starbucks this morning, and then again at the grocery store. I called the company, and they said the account was closed. Oh no, I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. That's strange. Let me look into it. Look into it? Mom, I have bills due today. My rent is due Monday. What's going on? I'm not sure, sweetheart. There have been some complications with my financial situation lately. Complications? What kind of complications? Well, my accountant advised me to restructure some of my assets for tax purposes. Everything's been moved into a family trust, and apparently that affects access to certain accounts. A family trust? What does that mean? It means the money is still there, but it's not as easily accessible as it was before. There are certain requirements that have to be met before funds can be distributed. Requirements? Mom, what are you talking about? I could hear the panic building in her voice, and I have to admit, part of me was enjoying it. For the first time in years, Tiffany was having to think about money instead of just spending it. I'm still figuring out all the details, I said. The lawyer who set it up used a lot of legal language I don't fully understand. Something about demonstrating financial responsibility and family commitment before accessing trust funds. Mom, this is insane. I need money now.
Today.
Can't you just transfer some from your regular account? I'm afraid it's not that simple anymore. All my assets are tied up in the trust now. Then untie them. I can't, sweetheart. It's a legal document. Once it's established, it can't be undone without meeting the specified conditions. There was a long silence on the other end of a line. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to process the fact that her ATM had suddenly stopped dispensing cash. What conditions? She asked finally, her voice small. I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm meeting with a trust attorney next week to go over all the details. But from what I understand, it has something to do with proving that beneficiaries truly value family relationships over financial benefits. Another silence. Then, Mom, are you doing this because of the engagement dinner? Sweetheart, this has nothing to do with the engagement dinner. This is about tax planning and asset protection. My accountant has been recommending this for years. It wasn't technically a lie. My accountant had mentioned family trusts before, though never in this context. But the timing is just a coincidence. I finally decided to listen to professional advice about protecting my wealth for future generations. Future generations? Mom, I'm your only child. Who else would inherit your money? And there it was, the assumption that had been driving our relationship for years. The idea that my money was somehow already hers, that she was just waiting for me to die to claim what she saw as her birthright. Well, I said carefully, the trust allows for the possibility of other beneficiaries. Godchildren, for instance. Charitable organizations. People who demonstrate genuine appreciation for family relationships. Godchildren. Her voice rose to a near shriek. You mean Sam? The trust doesn't specify. It's designed to reward family members who show proper respect and appreciation. Proper respect? Mom, what does that even mean? I suppose we'll find out when I meet with the attorney. I let her stew on that for a moment before adding, I'm sorry about your credit card situation, sweetheart. Maybe this is a good opportunity to practice living within your means for a while. Living within my means? Mom, I don't have any means. My job barely covers my basic expenses, and you know that. Perhaps it's time to look for a better job then. The silence that followed was so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, in a voice I'd never heard from her before, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Tiffany. I'm protecting my assets in the way my advisors recommend. If you have a problem with that, you'll need to discuss it with a trust attorney. Who is the trust attorney? Patricia Wells. Your friend Patricia? Mom, this is ridiculous. Just call her and fix this. I'm afraid it's not that simple. But don't worry, I'm sure we can work something out once I understand all the requirements. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and allowed myself a small smile. For the first time in years, Tiffany was going to have to think about money instead of just spending it. She was going to have to consider what she'd been taking for granted. Most importantly, she was going to have to decide whether having a relationship with me was worth more than having access to my bank account. I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly what I meant to my daughter. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. If you're watching this and thinking about someone in your life who takes you for granted, stick with me. And story is just getting started, and what happens next will show you exactly how powerful you can be when you stop accepting less than you deserve. Hit that like button if you're rooting for her, and don't forget to subscribe because this revenge story is about to get very, very satisfying. The weekend that followed was the quietest my phone had been in years. No calls from Tiffany asking for money, no texts about things she needed, no casual conversations that inevitably turned into requests for financial help. It was peaceful, and it was telling. Monday morning, I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on my door. Mrs. Emanuel? Your daughter is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Of course it was urgent. Everything was urgent when Tiffany needed something. And Emanuel, I answered, using my professional voice. Mom, thank God. I've been trying to figure out this trust situation all weekend, and I'm completely confused. Can you please just explain to me what's happening? Her voice was different, less demanding, more pleading. Interesting. What would you like to know, sweetheart? Everything. I've been doing research online about family trusts, and I can't find anything that matches what you're describing. Most trusts don't just lock up money for no reason. She'd been doing research. That was new. Tiffany had never shown any interest in understanding money beyond how to spend it. Well, I said, settling back in my chair, it's a very specialized type of trust, designed specifically for families where there are concerns about beneficiaries who might not properly appreciate their inheritance. Concerns about beneficiaries? Mom, what is that supposed to mean? I think it means exactly what it sounds like. The trust is designed to ensure that money goes to people who truly value family relationships, not just family wealth. But I do value our relationship. Do you? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I waited, letting the silence stretch, forcing her to think about her answer. Of course I do. You're my mother. And yet, you excluded me from your engagement dinner because I wasn't considered close family by your future in-laws. Mom, that wasn't. And the first time you've called me since then was to ask for $180,000 for a wedding. That's not fair. I call you all the time. When, Tiffany? When do you call me? And what do we talk about when you do? Another silence. I could practically hear her trying to remember the last conversation we'd had that didn't involve her needing something. I've been busy with the engagement and wedding planning. For 8 months? You've been too busy to have a real conversation with me for 8 months. Mom, you're being dramatic. We talk all the time. We do not talk, Tiffany. You report. You tell me what you need, what you want, what you're doing with people who are more important to you than I am. But we don't talk. That's not true. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Not financially, not whether I could help you with something, but how I was actually doing. The silence stretched, so long I thought she'd hung up. I don't know, she said finally, her voice very small. Neither do I.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I didn't realize. What didn't you realize, Tiffany? That I have feelings? That I might want a relationship with my daughter that isn't based entirely on what I can provide for her financially? That's not what our relationship is based on, isn't it? Tell me, what do you know about my life right now? Not my business, not my money, my actual life. Another long pause. You're working on some big consulting projects. What else? You live in Charleston? What else, Tiffany? Mom, I don't understand what you want me to say. I want you to realize that you don't know anything about me beyond my ability to write checks. You don't know if I'm dating anyone, if I'm lonely, if I'm happy, if I'm struggling with anything. You don't know because you've never asked. Mom, her voice was shaky now.
I'm sorry.
I really am. But this trust thing, it's not fair. You can't just cut me off without warning because you're upset about the engagement dinner. I'm not cutting you off, and this isn't about the engagement dinner. This is about restructuring my assets according to professional advice. The trust has very specific requirements for distribution, and I'm still learning what they are. What requirements? This was the crucial moment. I needed to plant the seed that would make her understand exactly what she'd been taking for granted. From what I understand so far, beneficiaries have to demonstrate genuine family commitment over a sustained period. Not just lip service, but actual investment in family relationships. What does that mean exactly? I'm not entirely sure yet. The attorney mentioned things like regular communication that isn't financially motivated, involvement in family decisions, showing appreciation for family members rather than just their resources. But Mom, I do appreciate you.
Do you?
Or do you appreciate what I can do for you? That's not fair. Isn't it? Tiffany, when was the last time you visited me just because you wanted to see me? Not because you needed something, not because you were passing through for some other reason. When did you last come to Charleston just to spend time with your mother? The silence told me everything I needed to know. I've been busy. Everyone's busy, sweetheart. But people make time for what matters to them. You matter to me. Then prove it.
How?
I don't know. But if you want access to the trust funds, you'll need to figure it out. According to Patricia, the trust requires a sustained demonstration of family commitment before any distributions can be made. How long is sustained? I believe she mentioned something about a minimum of 6 months of consistent behavior that demonstrates genuine family relationships rather than transactional ones. I was making this up as I went along, but it sounded official enough, and it gave me a timeline to work with. 6 months? Mom, I'm getting married in 8 months. I need money now for deposits and planning. Then you'd better start demonstrating that family commitment immediately. This is insane. You can't hold your own daughter's wedding hostage. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm following the legal requirements of a trust designed to protect family wealth and ensure it goes to people who truly value family relationships. But Mom… Tiffany, I have to go. I have a meeting with a client, but I suggest you think carefully about what kind of relationship you want to have with me going forward. What do you mean? I mean that for 27 years, I've been writing checks and accepting whatever scraps of attention you felt like giving me in return. Maybe it's time for that dynamic to change. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. Maybe you should be scared. Maybe you should be scared that you've taken the most important relationship in your life completely for granted. I hung up before she could respond, and immediately felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because for the first time in years, Tiffany was having to consider my feelings. Sadness because it had taken financial manipulation to get her attention. But this was necessary. This was the only way to save our relationship, if there was anything left to save. The rest of the week was quiet. No calls, no texts, no contact at all from Tiffany. I found myself checking my phone constantly, wondering if she was going to call, wondering what she was thinking, wondering if she was talking to Charles and his family about the crazy woman who'd raised her. On Thursday, Sam called. "How's Operation Wake Up Call going?" he asked. Quietly. She called Monday, seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation, but I haven't heard from her since. That's probably a good sign. She's thinking. Or she's figuring out how to get around me. Sam, what if this backfires? What if she just writes me off completely and finds another way to pay for the wedding? Then you'll know exactly where you stand with her, and you can stop pretending otherwise. He was right, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. Friday evening, I was sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset over Charleston Harbor, when my phone rang. Tiffany's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral.
Mom,
I was thinking about you and wanted to see how your week was going. I nearly choked on my wine. In 27 years, Tiffany had never called just to see how my week was going. That's very sweet of you to ask. It's been busy but good. How about yours? Oh, wedding planning is crazy. But actually, I want to tell you about something funny that happened today. I was at the florist and she was showing me these elaborate arrangements, and I kept thinking about those simple wildflower bouquets you used to pick for me when I was little. Remember those? I did remember. Every summer morning, I'd go into our garden and pick whatever was blooming, then put together little bouquets for Tiffany's breakfast table. She'd loved them then. I remember, I said carefully. I'd forgotten how much I loved those. They were so much more special than anything you could buy. They were made with love. Exactly. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. About our relationship. And I realized you're right. I haven't been a very good daughter lately. My heart leaped, but I forced myself to stay cautious. This could be genuine remorse, or it could be manipulation designed to get her access to money again. What do you mean? I mean I've been treating you like a bank instead of my mother. And that's not fair to you, and it's not fair to our relationship. Go on. I want to do better. I want to have a real relationship with you again, like we used to have when I was younger. What does that look like to you? I don't know yet. But maybe I could come visit you next weekend? Just to visit, not because I need anything. We could have dinner, maybe walk around the historic district like we used to do. I could meet some of your friends, see your office, just spend time together. It sounded wonderful. It also sounded too good to be true. That would be lovely, I said. But Tiffany, I need you to understand something. This can't be a performance to try to gain access to trust funds. If you're doing this to manipulate me into releasing money, it's going to backfire. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Mom. I'm trying to fix our relationship because I just realized how badly I've damaged it. I hope that's true. It is. I promise. Can I come down Saturday morning? I could drive down Friday night and stay through Sunday. I'd love that. Great. And Mom, I love you. I should have said that more often. After we hung up, I sat on my porch as darkness fell over Charleston, trying to decide if I'd just heard genuine remorse or the most sophisticated manipulation attempt yet. I suppose I'd find out this weekend. But either way, Tiffany was finally paying attention to our relationship instead of just my bank account. And that was progress, even if it was motivated by self-interest. Sometimes the why matters less than the what. If she started acting like a loving daughter, maybe she'd remember how to actually be one. Or maybe she'd just get better at pretending. Time would tell. Tiffany arrived Friday night at 8 o'clock, and I have to admit, my heart lifted when I saw her. She looked beautiful as always, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but there was something different about her expression. She looked nervous, maybe even vulnerable. "Mom," she said, hugging me tighter and longer than she had in years. "I missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart." We had dinner on my back porch, overlooking the garden where I'd picked those wildflowers she'd mentioned. For the first time in months, we talked about things that didn't involve money. She told me about Charles's work at his family's investment firm, about the apartment they were looking at together, about a cooking class she'd started taking. "I never realized how much I didn't know about basic life skills," she said, laughing as she described her attempt at making bread. "I've been so dependent on takeout and restaurants, I didn't even know how to properly scramble eggs." "I could teach you," I offered. "Some of the recipes your grandmother taught me." "I'd love that." Saturday morning, we made breakfast together in my kitchen. I watched her struggle with simple tasks, cracking eggs, measuring flour, timing the pancakes properly. It was clear she'd never had to cook for herself, had never had to think about food beyond ordering it or having someone else prepare it. "This is harder than it looks," she said, flipping a pancake that immediately fell apart. "Everything worthwhile is harder than it looks," I said. "But that's what makes it satisfying when you get it right." We spent the day walking through Charleston's historic district. I showed her places I'd never bothered to mention before. The coffee shop where I had my weekly breakfast with Patricia, the bookstore where I spent Saturday afternoons, the gallery where I'd been thinking about buying a piece for my office. "I didn't know you collected art," she said, stopping in front of a painting that had caught my eye. "I don't really, but I've been thinking about investing in some pieces." This artist is local, and her work reminds me of those summers we spent at the beach when you were little. "I remember those," Tiffany said softly. "Those were some of the happiest times of my childhood." "Mine too." That evening, we had dinner with Patricia and her husband James. I watched Tiffany carefully during the meal, curious to see how she'd interact with my friends. To my surprise, she was charming and engaged, asking Patricia about her law practice and James about his photography hobby. "Your mother talks about you all the time," Patricia said during dessert. "She's so proud of everything you've accomplished." "She is. Of course she is. You're her whole world." I saw something flicker across Tiffany's face, surprise, maybe even guilt, as if she'd never realized that she was the center of my universe. Sunday morning, we were having coffee on the porch when Tiffany brought up the wedding for the first time all weekend. "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about the trust requirements, about demonstrating family commitment. Here it comes, I thought. The real reason for this visit. What about it? I want to understand what that means specifically. Not because I'm trying to game the system, but because I realize I need to be a better daughter regardless of the money situation. What do you think it means? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the garden. I think it means caring about you as a person, not just as someone who can solve my problems. It means being interested in your life, not just your ability to fund mine. That's a good start. But, Mom, I also need to be honest with you about something. Charles and his family, they're expecting a certain type of wedding. Eleanor has already started talking to people about it, and there are expectations about the scale and the venue and the guest list. What kind of expectations? Big expectations. Expensive expectations. The kind of wedding that makes a statement about the families involved. I set down my coffee cup and looked at my daughter directly. Tiffany, what kind of statement are you trying to make? I don't know anymore. When Charles first proposed, I thought I wanted this huge, elaborate wedding that would impress everyone and establish us in his social circle. But this weekend, being here with you, I keep thinking about what really matters. And what does really matter? Family. The people who actually love you, not the people who are impressed by how much money you can spend on a party. It sounded good. It sounded genuine. But I've been burned by hope before. So, what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we don't need to spend $180,000 on one day. Maybe we could do something smaller, more meaningful. Something that focuses on celebrating love instead of showing off wealth. What does Charles think about that? I haven't talked to him about it yet. But Mom, if he's the right person for me, he should understand that love matters more than luxury. And if he doesn't understand that, she was quiet for a long moment. Then maybe he's not the right person for me. I felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. This was exactly what I'd wanted to hear, but it felt too easy, too neat. Tiffany, I want to believe that you mean that. But I need you to prove it.
How?
Have the conversation with Charles. See how he reacts when you suggest scaling back the wedding. And more importantly, see how you feel about his reaction. What if he doesn't like the idea? Then you'll have learned something important about who you're marrying. And what about the trust? If I can demonstrate that I value family over money, does that mean I can access some funds for a smaller wedding? There it was. Even with all the progress we'd made this weekend, it still came back to money. The trust has very specific requirements, I said carefully. And sustained demonstration means more than one weekend of good behavior. How much more? I think the minimum period is 6 months of consistent family commitment before any distributions can be considered. 6 months. At least. Tiffany, you've spent years treating me like an ATM. It's going to take more than a few days to prove that's changed. She looked disappointed but not angry, which was progress. What does family commitment look like over 6 months? I don't know. Why don't you tell me what you think it should look like? She thought about it for a moment. Regular contact that isn't about money. Visiting not because I need something, but because I want to see you, including you in my life, not just calling when I have news to report. That sounds like a good start. And if I do those things, if I prove that I can be a better daughter, then you'll consider helping with wedding expenses? I'll consider it. But Tiffany, you need to understand that even if the trust allows for some distributions, it's not going to be anything like the budget you originally requested. How much are we talking about? I don't know yet. The trust documents specify that distributions should be proportional to demonstrated commitment and should reflect reasonable rather than extravagant expenses. So, not $180,000. Probably not even close to that. She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Mom, can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Are you doing this to punish me for the engagement dinner? The question hung in the air between us like a test. This was my chance to come clean, to admit that the trust was really about teaching her a lesson. But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I'm doing this because my financial advisor and attorney recommended restructuring my assets this way. The timing might seem related to recent events, but the decision was based on professional advice about protecting wealth for future generations. But the requirements about family commitment are standard in trusts designed to prevent beneficiaries from taking inheritance for granted. Apparently, it's a common problem among wealthy families. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had done research on family trusts, and some of them did have behavioral requirements for beneficiaries. So, this isn't about punishing me. This is about making sure that family wealth goes to people who truly appreciate family relationships. I do appreciate our relationship, Mom. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do. Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Over time. And if I do, you'll help with the wedding? If you do, I'll work with a trust attorney to see what's possible within the legal requirements. After Tiffany left Sunday afternoon, I sat in my living room and tried to process the weekend. She'd been more attentive and engaged than she'd been in years. She'd seemed genuinely interested in my life and genuinely remorseful about our damaged relationship. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still transactional. That she was performing family commitment to gain access to trust funds, not because she'd actually realized what she'd been taking for granted. Only time would tell if the change was real or just a more sophisticated form of manipulation. But either way, she was finally paying attention to our relationship instead of ignoring it. And that was something.
I just hoped it was enough.
We're halfway through and story now, and I want to know, are you team or do you think she's being too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're loving the story of a mother who finally stopped being taken for granted, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we have so many more stories of women who found their power. Now, let's see what happens when Tiffany has to choose between love and money. The change in Tiffany's behavior was immediate and dramatic. Starting Monday morning, I began receiving daily phone calls that had nothing to do with money. She'd call while walking to work to tell me about something funny she'd seen, or during lunch to share a story about her day. For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking about my business meetings, my weekend plans, my thoughts on everything from politics to what I was reading. It was wonderful. It was also suspicious. She's trying too hard, Sam observed during our weekly call. No one changes that completely overnight. I know, I said. But at least she's trying. And honestly, even if it's motivated by self-interest, I'm getting to have actual conversations with my daughter for the first time in years. Just don't let your guard down. People who are genuinely sorry change gradually. People who are manipulating change dramatically and suddenly. He was right, but I was enjoying the attention too much to care about the motivation. For 3 weeks, Tiffany called every day. She sent photos of things that reminded her of childhood memories. She even started planning another visit to Charleston for the following month. Then, Charles got involved. Mom, Tiffany said during our Thursday evening call, I need to tell you about a conversation I had with Charles today. What about? I mentioned what we talked about, scaling back the wedding, focusing on what really matters instead of trying to impress everyone. How did he take it? A long pause. Not well. What did he say? He said that the wedding isn't just about us. It's about both our families and the image we're presenting to his social circle. He said that having a small, simple wedding would reflect poorly on both the Davenport name and the Emanuel name. And what did you say? I told him that I didn't think our families should be judged based on how much money we spend on a party. Good for you. What was his response? He said that I was being naive about how social circles work, and that if we don't establish ourselves properly with this wedding, it will hurt his career prospects and our future social standing. I felt a cold anger building in my chest. Tiffany, do you hear what he's saying? He's telling you that your value as a wife is tied to how much money you can bring to impress his friends. That's not what he meant, isn't it? What exactly did he mean, then? He meant that there are certain expectations in his world, and that meeting those expectations is important for our future. Whose expectations? His mother's? People he wants to impress? I don't know. I guess, yes. And what about your expectations? What about what you want? I want to marry Charles. Even if it means spending your life trying to meet other people's expectations about how much money you should spend. She was quiet for a long moment. Mom, it's more complicated than that.
Is it? Because it sounds pretty simple to me.
Either Charles loves you enough to marry you regardless of how much your mother spends on the wedding, or he doesn't. It's not about whether he loves me. It's about fitting into his world. And is his world worth fitting into if it requires you to bankrupt your family to gain entry? I'm not trying to bankrupt you. $180,000, Tiffany. That's what you asked for. Do you have any idea what that means? Of course I do. It's a lot of money. It's more than that. It's my entire annual living expenses. It's more than I paid for my first house. It's enough money to fund a comfortable retirement for someone who didn't spend their career building wealth. But Mom, you have more than enough. That's not the point. The point is that you asked me to spend that much money without blinking, as if it was nothing because Charles and his family expect a certain type of wedding. I'm sorry. I didn't think about it that way. And that's exactly the problem. You didn't think about it at all. You just assumed that my money was available to meet other people's expectations. I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. Mom, I don't know what to do. I love Charles, but I also don't want to lose you. You don't have to choose between us, sweetheart. But you do have to choose what kind of person you want to be. Do you want to be someone who values family relationships, or someone who sacrifices family relationships to meet social expectations? Can I have both? Not if Charles isn't willing to support your choice to prioritize family. But what if he leaves me? Then he was never worthy of you in the first place. Mom, that's easy for you to say. You're not the one who might lose the person you want to marry. No, but I am the person who might lose the daughter I've spent 27 years loving and supporting. The words hung between us like a challenge. I could hear Tiffany breathing on the other end of the line, processing what I'd said. I don't want to lose you either, she said finally. Then don't. But how do I handle Charles? How do I make him understand that this matters to me? You tell him the truth. You tell him that your relationship with your mother is more important than impressing his social circle. And then you see how he responds. And if he doesn't like it, then you'll have learned something very important about the man you're planning to marry. That weekend, Tiffany didn't call. For 3 days, my phone was silent, and I found myself checking it constantly, wondering what was happening, whether she was talking to Charles, whether he was pressuring her to choose between his expectations and our relationship. Monday morning, my phone finally rang. Mom, Tiffany's voice was small and shaky. I'm here, sweetheart. I told Charles what you said about prioritizing family relationships over social expectations. And he didn't take it well. What happened? He said that if I can't understand the importance of establishing ourselves properly in his social circle, then maybe I'm not mature enough to be married to someone from his background. The audacity of it took my breath away. He said you weren't mature enough? He said that people from his world understand certain responsibilities, and that if I can't accept those responsibilities, then maybe we're not compatible. And what did you say? I told him that I thought marriage should be about love and partnership, not about meeting other people's expectations. Good for you. He said that was a very naive way to look at marriage, and that successful marriages require understanding social obligations. Tiffany, do you hear yourself? You're describing a man who's essentially telling you that loving him means spending your family's money to impress his friends. I know how it sounds when you put it that way. How does it sound when you put it another way? I know how it sounds when you put it that way. How does it sound when you put it another way? A long pause. I can't think of another way to put it. Then maybe that tells you something. Mom, I don't know what to do. I love him, but I also realize that what you're saying makes sense. I don't want to spend my life trying to meet impossible standards just to be accepted by people who judge me based on how much money my family has. So, what are you going to do? I told him I needed time to think. And how did he respond to that? He said that if I needed time to think about something this basic, then maybe he needed time to think about whether I'm the right person for him. Tiffany, I'm sorry, but this man is showing you exactly who he is. He's showing you that his social standing is more important to him than your feelings, that his family's expectations matter more than yours, and that he's willing to threaten to leave you if you don't comply with his demands. I know. I do know that. But, Mom, I also know that breaking up with him means admitting that I've wasted 8 months of my life on someone who didn't really love me. Or it means recognizing that you've learned something important about what you want in a partner before you made a permanent mistake. What if I never find anyone else? Sweetheart, you're 27 years old, you're beautiful, you're intelligent, and you deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for how much money your mother is willing to spend on a wedding. But what if? What if you spend the rest of your life with someone who sees you as a social accessory instead of a partner? What if you have children with someone who values appearance over substance? What if you wake up in 10 years and realize you've been trying to meet impossible standards for someone who is never worthy of the effort? I could hear her crying again, but this time it sounded different. Not the tears of frustration or anger, but the tears of someone finally seeing clearly. Mom, I think I've been an idiot.
No, sweetheart.
You've been in love. Sometimes that makes us blind to things we should see clearly. What should I do? What do you want to do? I want to call off the engagement. Then call it off. But everyone will think I'm crazy. His family, his friends, everyone who knows about the engagement. Let them think what they want. The people who matter will understand. Will you understand? Sweetheart, I will be proud of you for choosing self-respect over social acceptance. Even if it means I'm 27 and single again? Especially if it means you're 27 and free to find someone who actually deserves you. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about Tiffany, wondering if she'd actually have the courage to end her engagement, wondering how Charles would react, wondering if I'd pushed her too hard. But mostly I was proud of her. For the first time in years, she was making a decision based on her values rather than other people's expectations. And if she followed through, it would prove that the trust had worked exactly as I'd intended, not to punish her, but to help her remember who she really was underneath all the social climbing and status seeking. Tomorrow would tell me if my daughter was finally ready to choose family over fortune. Tiffany called me at 6 in the morning, which was either very good news or very bad news. Mom, I did it. Did what, sweetheart? I broke up with Charles. I called off the engagement. I sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. Tell me what happened. I went to his apartment last night after we talked. I told him that I'd made my decision, that my relationship with my family was more important to me than impressing his social circle. And he said that was disappointing but not surprising, given my background. The casual cruelty of it made my blood boil. Given your background? He said that people from new money families often struggle to understand the social obligations that come with marrying into established wealth. What did you say to that? I told him that if marrying him meant I had to be ashamed of where I came from, then I didn't want to marry him at all. Good for you. Then I gave him back the ring. How did he take that? Better than I expected, actually. He said he hoped I'd reconsider once I'd had time to think about what I was giving up. What you were giving up? His exact words were, "When you realize what kind of life you're walking away from, you'll come to your senses." The arrogance was breathtaking, as if the only possible reason to marry Charles was for his money and social status. "And how do you feel about it?" "Relieved," she said, sounding surprised. "I thought I'd be devastated, but mostly I just feel free." "I'm proud of you, Tiffany." "Are you? Really?" "I'm incredibly proud of you. It takes courage to walk away from something that looks perfect on paper when you realize it's wrong for you." "Mom, I need to tell you something else." "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what you said about the trust, about demonstrating family commitment. And I realized that even though I've been calling you every day for the past few weeks, I was still doing it for the wrong reasons." "What do you mean?" "I was doing it because I wanted access to the money, not because I genuinely wanted to repair our relationship. And that's not fair to you." The honesty of it was stunning. I'd suspected as much, but hearing her admit it was both painful and hopeful. "I appreciate you telling me that. I want to start over. Not because of the trust, not because I need money, but because I miss having a real relationship with my mother." "What does that look like to you?" "I don't know yet. But I want to figure it out without money being part of the equation." "Tiffany, I need to tell you something." "What?" This was the moment. I could come clean about the trust, admit that it was all manipulation designed to teach her a lesson. Or I could continue the fiction and see if her change was genuine. The trust attorney called me yesterday. "There's been a development." "What kind of development?" "Apparently, breaking off an engagement affects the trust requirements. Something about demonstrating that you prioritize family relationships over financial gain." "What does that mean?" "It means that your decision to end your engagement rather than pressure me for wedding money has satisfied some of the trust requirements." "Really?" The attorney said that choosing family loyalty over social advancement is exactly the kind of behavior the trust was designed to encourage. "So, does that mean I can access some of the money?" And there it was. Even after breaking up with Charles, even after claiming she wanted to start over without money being part of the equation, her first question was about accessing funds. "It means we can discuss some limited distributions for reasonable expenses." "How limited?" "Very limited. The trust still requires sustained demonstration of family commitment, but there might be some flexibility for modest expenses related to starting over." "What kind of expenses?" "I don't know yet. I'm meeting with Patricia tomorrow to discuss the options." "Could it include moving expenses?" "I can't afford to stay in my current apartment without Charles, and I need to find someplace cheaper." Finally, a reasonable request. Something based on actual need rather than social expectations. That sounds like exactly the kind of expense the trust might cover. "Really? Really? Tiffany, this is what I've been trying to tell you. If you focus on real needs instead of artificial wants, if you prioritize genuine relationships over social climbing, then we can work together to solve problems." I think I'm finally starting to understand that. I hope so. We spent the next hour talking about practical things, her job, her apartment search, her plans for starting over. For the first time in months, she sounded like the intelligent, thoughtful young woman I'd raised instead of the status-obsessed stranger she'd become. But I also noticed that every few minutes, the conversation drifted back to money. What the trust might cover, how much she could access, when distributions might be possible. Old habits die hard. That afternoon, I called Patricia to discuss the next phase of my plan. "So she actually broke up with him?" Patricia asked.
She did.
And I think she meant it. But she's still primarily motivated by money, even if she's being more reasonable about it. What's the next step? I want to help her with moving expenses and basic living costs, but I want to structure it in a way that teaches her to value money properly. What do you have in mind? I'm thinking about offering her a job.
A job.
At my company. Entry-level position, normal salary, health benefits. Something that gives her independence and teaches her what it means to earn money instead of just asking for it. You think she'll take it? If she's serious about starting over and building a genuine relationship with me, she will. If she's still looking for easy money, she won't. That's brilliant. What kind of position? Marketing coordinator, maybe. Something that uses her art background but requires her to actually work for her money. And if she says no, then I'll know the trust restrictions need to continue indefinitely. The next morning, I called Tiffany with my proposal. Sweetheart, I've been thinking about your situation, and I have an idea. What kind of idea? My company is expanding our marketing department. We need someone with an art background to help with visual campaigns and client presentations. The salary is $45,000 to start, with health benefits and performance bonuses. The line was quiet for a long moment. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity to earn your independence. But Mom, $45,000, that's not very much money. It's enough to live on if you budget properly. And it's honest money that you'll earn through your own work. But what about the trust? Couldn't I just access some of those funds instead? The trust is designed to supplement earned income, not replace it. And the requirements specify that beneficiaries must demonstrate financial responsibility through employment before any significant distributions can be made. Another pause. How long would I have to work before accessing trust funds? At least a year of stable employment and responsible financial management.
A year?
Tiffany, you're 27 years old. Most people your age have been working for their money for years. This isn't punishment, it's normal adult life. I know, but $45,000 just seems so little compared to what I'm used to spending. Then maybe it's time to learn what things actually cost when you're spending money you earned instead of money that was given to you. Where would I live? I can't afford my current apartment on that salary. There are plenty of affordable apartments in Charleston. You have to give up some luxuries, but you'd be able to live independently. What kind of luxuries? Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, the shopping habits you've developed. You'd have to learn to live within your means. But what if I can't? What if I'm not good at living on a budget? Then you'll learn. Millions of people manage to live on similar salaries. There's no reason you can't do the same. I could hear her thinking, weighing her options. This was the real test. Was she willing to give up her comfortable lifestyle to earn her independence? Or would she keep looking for ways to access easy money? Would I be working directly for you? You'd be working for my company, but not directly reporting to me. I don't want our family relationship to complicate your work performance. And after a year, I could access the trust funds? If you demonstrate financial responsibility and sustained employment, we could discuss some distributions for major life events. A house down payment, maybe, or funding for additional education. What about everyday expenses? What if I need help with things like car repairs or medical bills? Those are exactly the kinds of expenses that a stable job with health insurance should cover. But what if it's not enough? Then you'll learn to live differently. Tiffany, this is what I've been trying to teach you. Money has value because it represents work and sacrifice. When you just ask for it and receive it, it becomes meaningless. I understand that intellectually, but practically you'll figure it out because you'll have to. That's how most people learn financial responsibility. Would I have to move to Charleston? The job is here, so yes. What about my life in New York? My friends, my social circle?
What about them?
You just broke up with your fiancé, and most of your social circle was connected to him and his family. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. But Mom, starting over in Charleston feels like giving up. Or it feels like growing up. The words hung in the air between us. I could hear her breathing, processing what I was asking her to do. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. But Tiffany, understand that this is a genuine opportunity, not charity. If you take this job, you'll be expected to perform like any other employee. There won't be special treatment because you're my daughter. I understand. And if you decide not to take it, that's fine too. But the trust requirements remain the same: demonstrated financial responsibility through sustained employment before any distributions can be considered. So, if I don't take this job, I'd have to find another one anyway? If you want access to trust funds, yes. Can I have a few days to think about it? Take all the time you need. After I hung up, I realized I was holding my breath. This was it, the moment when I'd find out if Tiffany was really ready to change, or if she was still looking for the easy way out. A job paying $45,000 would require her to completely restructure her lifestyle. No more designer clothes, no more expensive restaurants, no more casual spending on things she didn't need. She'd have to learn to budget, to prioritize, to make choices about what was truly important. Most importantly, she'd have to earn her money instead of just asking for it. If she took the job, it would prove that she was serious about building independence and repairing our relationship. If she didn't, it would prove that she was still looking for ways to access my money without earning it. Either way, I'd finally have my answer about what kind of person my daughter really was. The next few days would tell me if 27 years of giving her everything she wanted had permanently damaged her character, or if there was still hope for her to become the woman I'd always believed she could be. I was about to find out if the financial guillotine I'd constructed had actually severed her dependence on unearned money, or if she'd find a way to keep her head and her entitled expectations intact. The blade was falling. Now I just had to wait to see what remained. 3 days passed without a word from Tiffany. No phone calls, no texts, no updates on her decision about the job offer. The silence was deafening, and I found myself checking my phone constantly, wondering what she was thinking, whether she was looking for other options, whether she was talking to friends who might be giving her advice about how to handle her suddenly limited financial situation. On Thursday morning, my phone finally rang. But it wasn't Tiffany, it was Eleanor Davenport. "Mrs. Emanuel," she said in that cool, cultured voice I remembered from our brief encounter in Boston. "I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I obtained your number from Charles." "Of course not. How can I help you?" "I understand that your daughter has ended her engagement to my son." "Yes, she has. I wanted to speak with you about the circumstances surrounding that decision." "What circumstances?" "Charles tells me that Tiffany claimed you were unable to provide adequate funding for their wedding due to some sort of trust situation." The implication was clear. Eleanor thought Tiffany had broken up with Charles because I was too poor to pay for the kind of wedding the Davenports expected. "I'm not sure I understand your concern, Mrs. Davenport. My concern is that a perfectly suitable engagement has been ended due to a temporary financial inconvenience. If the issue is simply a matter of liquidity, I'm sure we could work something out." "Work something out?" "The Davenport family could advance the wedding expenses, to be repaid once your trust situation is resolved." I almost laughed out loud. Eleanor was so convinced that anyone would want to marry into her family that she was offering to loan me money to fund Tiffany's wedding. "That's very generous of you, but I don't think that's necessary." "Mrs. Emanuel, I think you should understand that engagements in our social circle aren't entered into lightly. There are expectations, commitments, social obligations that go beyond personal feelings." "Are you saying that Charles wants Tiffany back?" "I'm saying that Charles is hurt and confused by Tiffany's sudden change of heart, and I believe it may have been precipitated by financial pressures that could be easily resolved." "Mrs. Davenport, I appreciate your call, but I don't think my daughter's decision was based on financial pressures. I think it was based on recognizing that she and Charles have different values." "Different values?" "Charles made it clear that her worth as a wife was tied to how much money her family could spend on their wedding. Tiffany decided that wasn't the kind of marriage she wanted." A long pause. "I think there may have been some miscommunication." "I don't think there was any miscommunication at all. I think Charles was very clear about his expectations, and Tiffany was very clear about her response to those expectations." "Mrs. Emanuel, Perhaps we could meet in person to discuss this situation. I'm sure we could find a way to resolve any misunderstandings. There's nothing to resolve. Tiffany made her choice, and I support it completely. Even if it means she's giving up the opportunity to marry into one of Boston's oldest families? Especially if it means that. Another pause, longer this time. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice was icier than before. I see. Well, I hope your daughter doesn't come to regret her decision. I hope so too. But if she does, that will be her choice to make, not mine or yours. After I hung up, I sat in my office and marveled at the audacity of the call. Eleanor Davenport was so convinced of her family's superiority that she couldn't imagine anyone choosing to walk away from them voluntarily. She'd assumed that Tiffany's decision was based on my financial limitations rather than her moral clarity. But more importantly, the call told me that Charles was hurt by Tiffany's rejection, which meant he'd actually cared about her, at least to some degree, which made his treatment of her even more despicable. He'd had genuine feelings for her, but he'd still been willing to make those feelings conditional on her family's ability to fund his social expectations. That afternoon, Tiffany finally called. Mom, I've made my decision about the job.
I'm listening.
I want to take it. I felt a surge of relief and pride that surprised me with its intensity. Are you sure? I'm sure. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize that I need to learn how to take care of myself. I can't keep depending on other people's money, yours or Charles's or anyone else's. What changed your mind? A few things. First, Charles's mother called me yesterday. Eleanor called you? She offered to pay for the wedding herself if I'd reconsider the engagement. She said that Charles was heartbroken and that they could work out the financial details later. What did you tell her? I told her that the engagement didn't end because of money problems. It ended because I realized I didn't want to spend my life with someone who saw me as a social accessory. Good for you. But Mom, the fact that she called at all made me realize something important. I've been living in a world where everything is about money and status and impressing other people. Even my own thinking has been corrupted by it. What do you mean? I mean that when you offered me a job, my first thought wasn't this is a great opportunity to build independence. It was $45,000 isn't very much money. As if the value of work was only about how much it paid, not about what it could teach me or how it could help me grow. And now I realize that I need to learn what money actually means. I need to understand what it feels like to earn it, to budget it, to make choices about how to spend it. I've never had to do any of those things. It won't be easy. I know, but I think that's the point. Easy hasn't made me a better person. If anything, it's made me worse. When do you want to start? As soon as possible. I'm already looking at apartments in Charleston, and I want to give notice on my place in New York. What kind of apartments are you looking at? One-bedroom places that I can actually afford on my salary. It's humbling, realizing how much space I was paying for that I didn't actually need. Most people manage to live happy lives in much smaller spaces. I'm starting to understand that. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you proud of me for making this choice? I'm incredibly proud of you. This is the hardest thing you've ever decided to do, and you're doing it for all the right reasons. I hope so. I'm scared, but I also feel like this is the first real decision I've made in years. What do you mean? I mean that everything else has been about what other people expected or wanted or thought was best for me. This is the first time I've made a choice based on what I think is right, regardless of what anyone else thinks. That's what growing up actually means. I wish I'd figured that out sooner. You figured it out when you were ready to figure it out. That's what matters. We spent the next hour discussing practical details, her start date, apartment hunting, the logistics of moving from New York to Charleston. For the first time in our conversations, Tiffany was asking practical questions about budgeting and living expenses instead of assuming that money would somehow appear to solve her problems. Mom, I have one more question. What's that? Are you disappointed that there won't be a wedding? I know you were probably looking forward to it, even with all the drama. The question caught me off guard. Was I disappointed? I'd spent months being angry about the wedding costs and the social expectations, but underneath that, I had been looking forward to celebrating my daughter's marriage. I'm disappointed that you didn't get to marry someone who truly deserved you, I said finally. But I'm not disappointed that you didn't marry Charles. Why not? Because I want you to marry someone who loves you for who you are, not for what your family can provide. Someone who would be proud to marry you even if we held the ceremony in my backyard with homemade decorations. Do you think I'll find someone like that? I think when you're ready, when you know who you are and what you're worth, you'll attract someone who appreciates those qualities. And until then, you'll learn to be happy with yourself, which is the most important relationship you'll ever have. That weekend, Tiffany drove down from New York to look at apartments and finalize the details of her job. It was strange, seeing her approach these practical tasks with the same intensity she'd once applied to shopping for designer clothes. She had a budget, a list of requirements, and a realistic understanding of what she could afford. Watching her negotiate with landlords and calculate monthly expenses, I realized that my plan had worked better than I'd hoped. The trust fiction had been designed to teach her the value of money and relationships, but it had done something more important. It had forced her to discover her own strength and independence. She was finally becoming the woman I'd always hoped she could be. And the best part was, she was doing it for herself, not for me or anyone else. The wedding that wasn't had turned out to be the best gift I could have given her. The gift of finding out who she really was when all the artificial supports were stripped away. You know what I love about this part of Anne's story? Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is not getting what we think we want. Tiffany thought she wanted a rich husband and a fancy wedding, but what she really needed was to find her own strength. If this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where losing something you wanted led to finding something better? Now, let's see how Anne's plan reaches its perfect conclusion. Tiffany started work on a Monday morning in March, and I have to admit, I was nervous. Not about her ability to do the job. She was intelligent and capable when she applied herself, but about whether she'd stick with it when the reality of earning $45,000 a year set in. I'd instructed my HR director to treat her exactly like any other new employee. No special privileges, no exceptions to policy, no hints that she was the boss's daughter. As far as the office was concerned, Tiffany Emanuel was just another marketing coordinator who happened to share my last name. The first week was rough. Tiffany called me every evening, exhausted and slightly overwhelmed by the pace of office life. I had no idea how tiring it is to work 8 hours a day, she said after her second day. By the time I get home, I barely have energy to make dinner. Most people adapt to the routine pretty quickly. I'm trying. But Mom, my apartment is so small compared to what I'm used to. And I went grocery shopping yesterday. Do you know how much food costs when you're actually paying attention to prices? Welcome to adult life. It's harder than I thought it would be. The best things usually are. But despite the complaints, she kept showing up. Every morning at 8:30, professionally dressed in clothes she'd bought from Target instead of Nordstrom, learning to manage budgets and timelines and client expectations. Her supervisor, Janet Morrison, gave me weekly updates on her performance. She's actually quite good, Janet reported after the first month. Creative, detail-oriented, and she asks smart questions. The only issue is that she sometimes seems surprised by normal workplace expectations. What do you mean? Things like being expected to work until 5 even if she finishes her tasks early, or having to get approval for expenses over $25. Little things that suggest she's never had to follow standard procedures before. Is it a problem? Not a problem, just an adjustment. She's learning quickly. What Janet didn't know was that I was watching from a distance, observing how Tiffany handled the challenges of independent living. Through mutual friends and casual observation, I tracked her progress with budgeting, social adjustments, and personal growth. The real test came in April, when her car broke down. "Mom," she called me on a Tuesday evening, sounding stressed. "My car needs $800 in repairs. I don't have $800. In the old days, I would have transferred the money immediately without question. Now I stayed silent, waiting to see what she'd do. "I've been looking at my budget," she continued, "and I think I can cover it if I skip some non-essential expenses this month and use part of my security deposit refund from the New York apartment." That sounds like a reasonable plan. It does? I was worried you'd think I was being irresponsible for not having more savings. "Tiffany, you've been working for 6 weeks and learning to live on a completely different budget. The fact that you can cover an unexpected expense at all shows that you're managing your money well." Really? Really? Most people your age would have to put car repairs on a credit card. I don't have a credit card anymore. I know. How does that feel? Terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because I can't just buy things when I want them, but liberating because I don't have that constant anxiety about debt that I didn't even realize I had. That's exactly how it should feel. By summer, the transformation was remarkable. Tiffany had not only adapted to her new lifestyle, but was thriving in it. She'd made friends at work, found a local art class she could afford, and started cooking at home instead of ordering takeout every night. "I made homemade pasta last night," she told me during one of our weekly dinners. "From scratch. It took 2 hours, but it was so satisfying to eat something I'd actually created instead of just purchased." Your grandmother would be proud. She always said that cooking for yourself was an act of self-respect. I'm starting to understand what she meant. The most significant change, though, was in our relationship. Without money complicating every interaction, we were finally able to have the kind of mother-daughter relationship I'd always wanted. We talked about books, politics, her work projects, my business challenges. She asked for advice about practical things like lease negotiations and retirement planning instead of just asking for money. In August, she got her first performance review and a small raise. 5%, she told me excitedly. "It's only about $2,000 more per year, but I earned it." How does it feel to earn a raise instead of just receiving money? It feels real, like I actually deserve it because I worked for it. You do deserve it. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course. I understand now why you did the trust thing. Why you made me learn to live on my own money instead of just giving me whatever I asked for. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean that if you'd just written me a check for the wedding, I would have married Charles and spent the rest of my life being dependent on other people's money. I would never have learned that I could take care of myself. And how do you feel about that now? Grateful. I'm grateful that you forced me to figure out who I was without all the artificial supports. This was my moment. I could come clean about the trust, admit that it had all been manipulation designed to teach her a lesson. Or I could let her continue believing that it was real, that her transformation had been required by legal documents rather than orchestrated by her mother. I'm glad it worked out that way, I said carefully. Mom, there's something else I want to tell you. What's that? I don't want access to the trust money anymore. What? I mean, I know the year isn't up yet and I haven't technically met all the requirements. But I've been thinking about it, and I realize that I don't want to go back to having unlimited access to money I didn't earn. Why not? Because I like the person I've become. I like having to think about whether I really need something before I buy it. I like the satisfaction of saving up for things I want. I like knowing that everything I have, I earned through my own work. But Tiffany, the trust money is still yours eventually. It's your inheritance. I know. And maybe someday I'll need it for something important, like buying a house or dealing with a medical emergency. But for everyday life, I want to live on what I earn. Are you sure? I'm sure. Mom, for the first time in my life, I respect myself. I respect my choices, my work, my ability to solve problems. I don't want to give that up for the convenience of having access to easy money. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was more than I'd dared to hope for. I'd wanted to teach her the value of money and work, but she'd learned something far more important, the value of self-respect and independence. There's one more thing, she said. What's that? I want to start paying you back. Pay me back for what? For everything. College, living expenses, all the money you spent on me over the years. I know it'll take forever on my current salary, but I want to start making payments. Tiffany, that's not necessary. It is necessary. For me. I need to know that I'm not just taking from you anymore, that I'm contributing to our relationship in a real way. How much are you thinking? I've been doing some calculations. If I can manage $200 a month, and if the trust eventually allows me to make larger payments when I access those funds, I think I could pay back most of what you spent on me over maybe 15 years. $200 a month was a significant portion of her take-home pay. It would mean sacrificing other things, living even more frugally than she already was. Are you sure you can afford that? I can afford it if it's important to me. And this is important to me. Why? Because I want our relationship to be based on mutual respect instead of one-sided giving. I want to be someone who contributes to your life instead of just taking from it. That night, I sat in my home office and tried to process what had happened. My plan had worked beyond my wildest dreams. Not only had Tiffany learned financial responsibility and the value of work, but she discovered something far more precious, her own worth and capability. She'd become the woman I'd always hoped she could be, and she'd done it by finding her own strength rather than relying on mine. The trust had been fiction, but the transformation was real. She'd chosen independence over dependence, self-respect over easy money, genuine relationship over transactional interaction. And now she wanted to pay me back for 27 years of supporting her financially. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. She wants to pay me back, I told her. For what? Everything. College, living expenses, all of it. She's calculated that she can afford $200 a month, and she wants to start immediately. That's incredible, Anne. I know. I never expected this. What are you going to do? I'm going to let her pay me back. Tiffany started work on a Monday morning in March, and I have to admit, I was nervous. Not about her ability to do the job. She was intelligent and capable when she applied herself, but about whether she'd stick with it when the reality of earning $45,000 a year set in. I'd instructed my HR director to treat her exactly like any other new employee. No special privileges, no exceptions to policy, no hints that she was the boss's daughter. As far as the office was concerned, Tiffany Emanuel was just another marketing coordinator who happened to share my last name. The first week was rough. Tiffany called me every evening, exhausted and slightly overwhelmed by the pace of office life. I had no idea how tiring it is to work 8 hours a day, she said after her second day. By the time I get home, I barely have energy to make dinner. Most people adapt to the routine pretty quickly. I'm trying. But Mom, my apartment is so small compared to what I'm used to. And I went grocery shopping yesterday. Do you know how much food costs when you're actually paying attention to prices? Welcome to adult life. It's harder than I thought it would be. The best things usually are. But despite the complaints, she kept showing up. Every morning at 8:30, professionally dressed in clothes she'd bought from Target instead of Nordstrom, learning to manage budgets and timelines and client expectations. Her supervisor, Janet Morrison, gave me weekly updates on her performance. She's actually quite good, Janet reported after the first month. Creative, detail-oriented, and she asks smart questions. The only issue is that she sometimes seems surprised by normal workplace expectations. What do you mean? Things like being expected to work until 5 even if she finishes her tasks early, or having to get approval for expenses over $25. Little things that suggest she's never had to follow standard procedures before. Is it a problem? Not a problem, just an adjustment. She's learning quickly. What Janet didn't know was that I was watching from a distance, observing how Tiffany handled the challenges of independent living. Through mutual friends and casual observation, I tracked her progress with budgeting, social adjustments, and personal growth. The real test came in April, when her car broke down. Mom, she called me on a Tuesday evening, sounding stressed. My car needs $800 in repairs. I don't have $800. In the old days, I would have transferred the money immediately without question. Now I stayed silent, waiting to see what she'd do. I've been looking at my budget, she continued, and I think I can cover it if I skip some non-essential expenses this month and use part of my security deposit refund from the New York apartment. That sounds like a reasonable plan. It does? I was worried you'd think I was being irresponsible for not having more savings. Tiffany, you've been working for 6 weeks and learning to live on a completely different budget. The fact that you can cover an unexpected expense at all shows that you're managing your money well. Really? Most people your age would have to put car repairs on a credit card. I don't have a credit card anymore. I know. How does that feel? Terrifying and liberating at the same time. Terrifying because I can't just buy things when I want them, but liberating because I don't have that constant anxiety about debt that I didn't even realize I had. That's exactly how it should feel. By summer, the transformation was remarkable. Tiffany had not only adapted to her new lifestyle, but was thriving in it. She'd made friends at work, found a local art class she could afford, and started cooking at home instead of ordering takeout every night. I made homemade pasta last night, she told me during one of our weekly dinners. From scratch. It took 2 hours, but it was so satisfying to eat something I'd actually created instead of just purchased. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said that cooking for yourself was an act of self-respect. I'm starting to understand what she meant. The most significant change, though, was in our relationship. Without money complicating every interaction, we were finally able to have the kind of mother-daughter relationship I'd always wanted. We talked about books, politics, her work projects, my business challenges. She asked for advice about practical things like lease negotiations and retirement planning instead of just asking for money. In August, she got her first performance review and a small raise. 5%, she told me excitedly. It's only about $2,000 more per year, but I earned it. How does it feel to earn a raise instead of just receiving money? It feels real, like I actually deserve it because I worked for it. You do deserve it. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course. I understand now why you did the trust thing. Why you made me learn to live on my own money instead of just giving me whatever I asked for. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean that if you'd just written me a check for the wedding, I would have married Charles and spent the rest of my life being dependent on other people's money. I would never have learned that I could take care of myself. And how do you feel about that now? Grateful. I'm grateful that you forced me to figure out who I was without all the artificial supports. This was my moment. I could come clean about the trust, admit that it had all been manipulation designed to teach her a lesson. Or I could let her continue believing that it was real, that her transformation had been required by legal documents rather than orchestrated by her mother. I'm glad it worked out that way, I said carefully. Mom, there's something else I want to tell you. What's that? I don't want access to the trust money anymore. What? I mean, I know the year isn't up yet, and I haven't technically met all the requirements. But I've been thinking about it, and I realize that I don't want to go back to having unlimited access to money I didn't earn. Why not? Because I like the person I've become. I like having to think about whether I really need something before I buy it. I like the satisfaction of saving up for things I want. I like knowing that everything I have, I earn through my own work. But Tiffany, the trust money is still yours eventually. It's your inheritance. I know. And maybe someday I'll need it for something important, like buying a house or dealing with a medical emergency. But for everyday life, I want to live on what I earn. Are you sure? I'm sure. Mom, for the first time in my life, I respect myself. I respect my choices, my work, my ability to solve problems. I don't want to give that up for the convenience of having access to easy money. I felt tears prick my eyes. This was more than I'd dared to hope for. I'd wanted to teach her the value of money and work, but she'd learned something far more important, the value of self-respect and independence. There's one more thing, she said. What's that? I want to start paying you back. Paying me back for what? For everything. College, living expenses, all the money you spent on me over the years. I know it'll take forever on my current salary, but I want to start making payments. Tiffany, that's not necessary. It is necessary. For me. I need to know that I'm not just taking from you anymore, that I'm contributing to our relationship in a real way. How much are you thinking? I've been doing some calculations. If I can manage $200 a month, and if the trust eventually allows me to make larger payments when I access those funds, I think I could pay back most of what you spent on me over maybe 15 years. $200 a month was a significant portion of her take-home pay. It would mean sacrificing other things, living even more frugally than she already was. Are you sure you can afford that? I can afford it if it's important to me. And this is important to me.
Why?
Because I want our relationship to be based on mutual respect instead of one-sided giving. I want to be someone who contributes to your life instead of just taking from it. That night, I sat in my home office and tried to process what had happened. My plan had worked beyond my wildest dreams. Not only had Tiffany learned financial responsibility and the value of work, but she discovered something far more precious, her own worth and capability. She'd become the woman I'd always hoped she could be, and she'd done it by finding her own strength rather than relying on mine. The trust had been fiction, but the transformation was real. She'd chosen independence over dependence, self-respect over easy money, genuine relationship over transactional interaction. And now she wanted to pay me back for 27 years of supporting her financially. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. She wants to pay me back, I told her. For what? Everything. College, living expenses, all of it. She's calculated that she can afford $200 a month, and she wants to start immediately. That's incredible, Anne. I know. I never expected this. What are you going to do? I'm going to let her pay me back. Really? Really? Because this isn't about the money. It's about her need to contribute, to be an equal partner in our relationship instead of just a recipient of my generosity. You realize this means you'll have to keep up the trust fiction indefinitely? I know. But Patricia, I've created something beautiful here. I've given my daughter the gift of discovering her own strength. I'm not going to take that away from her by admitting it was all manipulation. So the trust becomes real? The trust becomes real. I'll set up actual legal documents, transfer the money into an actual trust, make it all legitimate. And someday, when she's proven to herself that she doesn't need it, I'll make sure she inherits exactly what she would have inherited anyway. Minus her payments to you, plus interest. She's going to pay me back for her college education, and in 20 years, I'm going to surprise her with that money as a down payment on her first house. You're a devious woman, and Emmanuel. I'm a mother who finally figured out how to love her daughter properly. That was the truth. For 27 years, I'd thought love meant giving Tiffany everything she wanted. But real love meant helping her become someone capable of earning what she needed. The financial guillotine hadn't just severed her dependence on unearned money. It had cut away everything that was keeping her from becoming her best self. And now, watching her choose integrity over convenience, work over wealth, self-respect over easy money, I knew that the most expensive lesson I'd ever taught had been worth every penny. 2 years later, I was sitting in my office on a Thursday afternoon when Janet knocked on my door. "Mrs. Emanuel? I wanted to talk to you about Tiffany's performance review. How is she doing?" "Exceptional. She's exceeded every goal we've set for her, and she's become one of our most reliable team members. I'd like to recommend her for promotion to Senior Marketing Coordinator." "What does that involve?" "A salary increase to $58,000, supervisory responsibilities for 2 junior staff members, and leadership of our new client acquisition campaign." "Does she know you're considering her for this?" "Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first, given the family relationship." "Janet, I appreciate that, but Tiffany's career advancement should be based entirely on her merit, not on her relationship to me." "It is based on merit. She's earned this promotion completely independently." "Then offer it to her." "There's one more thing. The promotion would require some travel, maybe 2 trips per month to client sites around the Southeast. Is that something she'd be interested in?" "I have no idea. You'll have to ask her." That evening, Tiffany called me with the news. "Mom, you'll never guess what happened today." "Tell me." "Janet offered me a promotion. Senior Marketing Coordinator, with a raise and everything. I'll be supervising other people and leading major projects." "Congratulations. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified and excited. I've never supervised anyone before, and the salary increase means I'll have to pay more taxes, and the travel requirement means I'll need to figure out who can watch my apartment when I'm gone." I smiled at the way she immediately started thinking about the practical challenges instead of just celebrating the good news. "Those all sound like manageable problems." "They do, don't they?" "Mom, 2 years ago, if someone had offered me more money, I would have just seen it as an opportunity to spend more. Now I'm already thinking about how much extra I can put towards savings and my payments to you. Have I mentioned lately how proud I am of you?" "Only every time we talk. But I like hearing it." "Good, because I'm going to keep saying it." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you ever going to tell me the truth about the trust?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and some things don't add up." "What things?" "Well, for one thing, I've never actually seen any legal documents. For another thing, the requirements keep changing based on my behavior, which isn't how trusts usually work. And for a third thing, you're way too smart to have set up a trust that you didn't fully understand." My heart was hammering, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "I'm suggesting that maybe there never was a trust. Maybe you made the whole thing up to teach me a lesson about taking you for granted." "And how would you feel about that if it were true?" "Grateful." "Grateful?" "Mom, if you made up the trust to force me to learn how to be independent and responsible, then it was the best thing you ever did for me." "Even if it was manipulation?" "Especially because it was manipulation. You could have just cut me off completely and told me I was spoiled and entitled. Instead, you created a situation that let me figure it out for myself while still feeling like you loved and supported me." I was quiet for a long moment, trying to decide how to respond. "Hypothetically," I said carefully, "if someone had done something like that, what would you think their motivation was?" "Love." "Definitely love. Because it would have been much easier to just keep writing checks than to go through all the trouble of creating an elaborate fiction designed to help me grow up." "And you wouldn't be angry about being deceived?" "How could I be angry about deception that helped me become a better person?" So, hypothetically, if there was no trust and all the money was still just sitting in my regular accounts, you'd be okay with that? More than okay. Because it would mean that everything I accomplished because I chose to, not because I was required to buy legal documents. And you still wouldn't want access to the money? Mom, I make $58,000 a year now. I have health insurance, a retirement account, and enough savings to handle emergencies. I can afford to live in a decent apartment, eat well, and even splurge occasionally on things that matter to me. Why would I need access to your money? For a house down payment? For travel? For major purchases? If I want those things, I'll save for them. That's what normal people do. But you could have them now without waiting. Having things now instead of earning them over time is what got me into trouble in the first place. I like the person I am when I have to work for what I want. Even if it means living with less than you could afford. Mom, I'm not living with less. I'm living with exactly what I've earned, and that feels like more than I ever had when I was spending someone else's money. I felt tears gathering in my eyes. Not just because she'd figured out the truth, but because her response proved that the lesson had truly taken hold. Hypothetically, I said, what would you want to happen to your mother's money when she's no longer around to manage it? I'd want her to spend it on herself. Travel, experiences, things that make her happy. And if there's anything left over, I'd want it to go to causes that matter to her. Not to her daughter? Her daughter is perfectly capable of taking care of herself. What if her daughter wanted to start her own business someday? Or buy a house? Or deal with a major medical expense? Then her daughter could apply for business loans, save for a down payment, and buy health insurance like everyone else. Mom, the most valuable thing you've given me isn't money. It's the knowledge that I don't need anyone else's money to live a good life. That weekend, I drove to my attorney's office and had Patricia draft real trust documents. Not because I intended to use them, but because I wanted them to exist in case Tiffany ever needed to see proof that her transformation had been legally required rather than parentally orchestrated. But I also updated my will. Everything would still go to Tiffany eventually, but it would go into an actual trust with actual requirements that she demonstrate continued financial responsibility, that she use the money to supplement rather than replace earned income, and that she contribute a portion to charitable causes focused on financial literacy and independence for young women. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. Protection from ever going back to the entitled, dependent person she'd been before she learned her own worth. On Sunday evening, Tiffany came over for dinner. We were sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset over Charleston Harbor, when she brought up the promotion again. I've been thinking about the travel requirements for the new job, she said. And I'm excited about them. I've never traveled for work before, never been responsible for representing the company to important clients. It feels like being trusted with something valuable. You are being trusted with something valuable. Janet wouldn't have offered you the promotion if she didn't believe you could handle it. I know. And Mom, that feels so much better than being given things because of who my mother is. You've never been given anything because of who your mother is. I have, though. All those years when you paid for everything, I was getting opportunities and experiences based on your success, not my own merit. That's what parents do for their children.
To a point, yes.
But I think there's a line between supporting your children and enabling them. And you let me cross that line because you loved me. Do you resent that? I resent that I took advantage of it for so long. But I don't resent that you loved me enough to eventually make me stop. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching boats drift across the harbor in the golden evening light. Mom, can I tell you about something that happened at work this week? Of course. One of the junior coordinators, Ashley, came to me for advice about her finances. She's 23, just out of college, and she's struggling to make her student loan payments on her entry-level salary. What did you tell her? I told her about budgeting. about finding ways to reduce expenses, about the satisfaction of living within your means. But mostly, I told her that financial independence was worth every sacrifice it required. And how did she respond? She said it was the best advice anyone had ever given her about money. Not because it was particularly clever, but because it came from someone who'd actually learned those lessons rather than just repeating things she'd heard. You're becoming a mentor. I guess I am. And Mom, it feels good to be someone who can help others instead of just someone who needs help. That's what growing up actually means, becoming someone who contributes more than they consume. Is that what you were trying to teach me with the whole trust situation? Among other things. Well, it worked. I contribute now. To the company, to my relationships, to my own life. I solve problems instead of creating them.
Have I noticed?
And I've been thinking about something else. What's that? I want to start contributing to charity. Really? Really? I've been researching organizations that help young women develop financial literacy and independence. I want to donate a small amount every month. Nothing dramatic, just $25 or $50 that I can afford within my budget. Why is that important to you? Because I know what it's like to be financially illiterate and completely dependent on other people. If I can help even one person avoid that trap, it'll be worth it. I think that's wonderful. I also want to volunteer. Maybe teach basic budgeting classes or mentor young women who are trying to become financially independent. When would you find time for that? I'll make time. This is important to me, Mom. I want to turn my experience into something that helps other people. That night, after Tiffany left, I sat in my living room and reflected on the conversation. Not only had she learned financial responsibility and independence, but she developed a desire to help others learn the same lessons. She'd transformed from someone who only consumed resources into someone who wanted to create value for others. The trust fiction had given her a framework for understanding her transformation, but the real change had come from within. She discovered that she was capable of so much more than she'd ever imagined. 6 months later, Tiffany was thriving in her new role. She'd successfully led 3 client acquisition campaigns, earned praise from senior management, and had been selected to represent the company at a national marketing conference. More importantly, she'd started teaching weekend financial literacy workshops for young women, and she'd convinced 2 of her coworkers to join a monthly investment club where they learned about retirement planning and wealth building. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who got excited about teaching others to budget, she told me over lunch one Saturday. But there's something so satisfying about watching someone realize they don't have to live paycheck to paycheck forever. You're helping them discover their own power. Exactly. The same way you helped me discover mine. I didn't help you discover anything. You did that yourself. With guidance. Important guidance at exactly the right time. Speaking of timing, I have something to tell you. What? I've been offered an opportunity to consult for a firm in Atlanta. It would mean traveling 3 days a week for the next year, but it's a significant contract that would allow me to scale back my other work. That sounds exciting. Are you going to take it? I think I am. But it means I won't be as available for our regular dinners and weekend visits. Mom, I'm 29 years old and perfectly capable of managing my life without weekly check-ins. I know, but I'll miss them. I'll miss them too. But I'm also proud that you feel confident enough in my independence to pursue opportunities that interest you. When did you become the wise one in this relationship? When you taught me that wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from making your own choices and living with the consequences. I'm proud of who you've become, Tiffany. I'm proud of who I've become too. And Mom, I'm grateful every day that you loved me enough to stop enabling me. A year later, Tiffany was promoted again, this time to marketing manager with a salary of $72,000. She'd saved enough for a down payment on a small house, which she bought with a conventional mortgage that she qualified for based on her own income and credit history. She never asked me for financial help with the purchase. She never even mentioned that it would be easier if she had access to trust funds. She approached it exactly the way any other independent adult would, by saving money, improving her credit score, and working with a mortgage broker to find the best rates available. The day she got the keys to her house, she called me with tears in her voice. "Mom, I did it. I bought a house. By myself, with money I earned." How does it feel? It feels like the most important accomplishment of my life. Not because it's the nicest house or the most expensive house, but because it's mine. Really, truly mine. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done this without everything you taught me about independence and financial responsibility. You could have, and you would have. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe you would have made different choices, but you would have figured it out eventually. I don't think so. I think without the wake-up call you gave me, I would have spent my whole life depending on other people's money and never discovering what I was capable of. And now you know. Now I know. That evening, I sat in my home office and looked at the trust documents Patricia had drafted, but that I'd never actually funded. Tiffany had become everything I'd hoped she could become, and she'd done it without ever actually needing the legal structure I'd created to motivate her. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. "I want to fund the trust," I told her. "Really? After all this time?" "Really. But not as a requirement or a restriction. As a gift." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to put $5 million into the trust with instructions that it be distributed to Tiffany on her 40th birthday, assuming she continues to demonstrate the financial responsibility and independence she's already developed. And if she doesn't, then the money goes to the financial literacy programs she's been supporting." "But Patricia, I don't think there's any chance of that happening. She's become the kind of person who would turn down free money if she thought it would undermine her independence. So this is really a gift, not a test. This is recognition that she's already passed every test that matters. What if she finds out about the trust before her 40th birthday? Then she'll probably try to convince me to give the money to charity instead of saving it for her. And would you? Probably. Because that's exactly the kind of response that would prove she deserves it." I never told Tiffany about the real trust. As far as she knew, the fictional trust remained fictional, a clever piece of parental manipulation that had helped her discover her own strength. But when she turned 40, she was going to get a very real surprise, not because she needed the money, but because she'd proven beyond any doubt that she didn't need it. The woman who'd once demanded $180,000 for a wedding she couldn't afford had become someone who saved for down payments, lived within her means, and found deep satisfaction in earning everything she had. The daughter who'd excluded me from her engagement dinner because I wasn't the right kind of family had become someone who called every week just to talk, who included me in her important decisions not because she needed my money, but because she valued my perspective. The entitled young woman who'd treated me like an ATM had become a mentor who helped other women discover their own financial independence. And the best part was, she'd done it all herself. I'd just created the circumstances that allowed her to find out who she really was underneath all the artificial supports. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. Sometimes love means teaching people that they don't need you, so they can choose to want you instead. I'd spent 27 years trying to buy my daughter's love with money. It took creating an elaborate fiction about losing access to that money for both of us to learn that our relationship was worth so much more than any amount I could ever spend. The financial guillotine had cut away everything that was keeping us from having a real relationship. And what remained was stronger, more honest, and more valuable than anything money could buy. Tiffany was right. Only close family should have access to your resources. But real family isn't determined by blood or obligation. Real family is determined by choice, respect, and genuine love that exists independent of financial benefit. I'd finally learned the difference. And so had she. Thank you for joining me on Anne's incredible journey from enabler to empower, from ATM to beloved mother. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Stories like Anne's remind us that it's never too late to change the dynamics of our relationships, never too late to teach the people we love to value themselves. This is Her Real Stories, where we believe that the most powerful transformations happen when we stop accepting less than we deserve. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And ring that notification bell because we have so many more stories of women who found their strength, set their boundaries, and reclaimed their power.